5 Blue Bloods made the cut in the Koby Brea sweepstakes, and we now have a good idea of which one's going to win. Almost by default.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined today by our guy, Leaf Too Lean, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. We want to thank you so much for making us your first listen or watch. And a quick reminder, you can get every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all of you everydayers out there, as well as all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Look, I've got to admit it to you, I have a competitive side, and that side of me is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go right now, free on the App Store or at Google Play. Leave quickly as we get in. We're going to talk some Kentucky today. We're going to talk some Arkansas today, and we're going to talk some Michigan. 3 big entities in college basketball, but a couple reminders before we get there. Number one, the portal does close tonight, midnight or 11:59, I guess I should say, Eastern Standard Time. As a reminder, that now applies to both graduate, to undergrads and grads. And it doesn't mean that players have to have committed. It just means that if they want to be in the portal, they have to be in. Also, the NBA draft early entry list came out yesterday. It had a list of everyone that has filed paperwork to be an early entrant. A couple things. There were some notable exceptions that were due to clerical errors, like Caleb Love of Arizona and Hunter Salas of Wake Forest that should have been on the list but weren't, and some others that we thought would be on the list, but it turned out weren't. For example, Kentucky's Aidoo Thiero was not on there. Also, notably, one of the, probably top 3 candidates for National Player of the Year last year, RJ Davis, was missing off of that list and announced in the middle of the night, last night, that he was, in fact, returning to North Carolina, which we all knew from reporting last week, but you get it from the horse's mouth and you feel more confident in it. Leaf, all that said, we're going to start with Kentucky today. And the question we want to ask is, are the Wildcats going to win the Koby Brea sweepstakes? We know that he had named a final 5 of blue bloodery. It was Kentucky, UConn, Duke, Carolina, and Kansas. And as we look at it right now, he was set to visit the Huskies over the weekend, did so. He was scheduled to then go to Duke, but he canceled that visit. And then there were other things. UConn landed Aiden Mahaney. It sounds like they're all done. And so now the intriguing part here is that North Carolina also seems like they've got their backcourt intact, as does Kansas. And so Leaf, almost by default, it feels like he's a Kentucky guy. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think once he canceled Duke, it was between Kentucky and UConn. And once you got to that point, you had to think, okay, which teams got a more bolstered roster because you have an allotted amount of NIL, which by putting all these 5 blue bloods, he kind of just raised his value monetarily. And not only just as a basketball player, just monetarily in terms of, okay, well, if this team's going to pay, well, maybe we should pay him more. And I think the team with the least set pieces was clearly Kentucky. And then UConn even got a further piece and probably a better player than what Koby Brea is, admittedly different. But Aiden Mahaney goes to UConn while like in the following days after Brea's visit. And you kind of look at it and you go, okay, well, logically, I guess he's heading to Lexington. So I'd be pretty shocked if he doesn't go there. I think Mark Pope's starting to put together a team, but it's definitely not a team that you would say, oh, that looks like a Kentucky yet. So I'm curious to see what happens, especially if he takes as much money as he's rumored to have been receiving from Kentucky, because it's going to be hard to recruit even with you Kentucky money if you're going to give a player that is a really good player. I saw him play twice, and I thought he's the best shooter in college basketball just from watching him practice. I was like, I watched probably 50 shots. I think he made 47 of them from three.
Jeez.
Like he was just
Did
messing
you count
around.
that? Did you sit there and tally those, Leaf? Is that what you did?
Pretty close to it. I mean,
Come
I
on,
might be
man.
off
Wow.
by one or two, but like I watched him shoot, and there was people running around, and there was music, and guy just everything was perfect out of his hands. Then he goes and plays Nevada. They're dead in the water, and I kept telling my buddy, I was like, why don't they give it to Brea? The dude can shoot. He hits 4 straight, and then they go against Arizona, and all their best instances, he hits 27 footers, and it was like, okay, well maybe this guy's really good, but $1.7 million good, I don't know. I mean, that's what the latest rumors are. So I'm excited to see him in Lexington. I wonder if he gets a role like what Antonio Reeves had this past year, and maybe you could really reward that type of shooting prowess. But I don't know. It's crazy to see that type of money tossed around for one player, not just a recruiting class in total.
Yeah, it really is, and that's kind of the state of affairs now. And Leaf, you mentioned the Antonio Reeves of it all, and it's interesting because that was under a different coach and his system. Kind of ironic that we go from John Calipari, who apparently just discovered the 3-point shot in the modern game last season for the first time, to now Mark Pope, the new head coach, who has fully embraced the 3-point shot. And so to me, as you look at the way Koby Brea would fit in Mark Pope's offense, it seems to make a ton of sense as you think about that. Koby Brea, Mark Pope, you see all the threes that BYU was shooting last year. Yes, it led to some high degree of variability, but this is a dude who was literally 1 3-point make shy of shooting over 50% from the air. And that doesn't mean like, he hit 5 of 12 instead of 6 of 12. This dude was 100 for 201 from the 3-point line. Leaf, that's absolutely insane. As you look at him, does he make sense in this offense?
I mean, as constructed and assuming Mark Pope plays similarly to how he played at BYU,
That's the
absolutely.
thing.
Because if he plays similarly to BYU, I could see Koby Brea being a better version of what Jackson Robinson was as a shooter, or a far better version of what Trevin Knell was. Trevin Knell, I watched plenty when he was in college at BYU, but also in high school, and he can shoot the rock. But Koby Brea shoots it, and he's a better athlete. And Trevin Knell was a really good 6-man in the Big 12. So I think Brea could be that in the SEC very easily. I also think that they're going to have to modernize the style to allure a little more to Kentucky. What I mean by that is less of play through the 5 and go into kind of split cuts for threes. They're going to need to get some flashy, exciting plays because Kentucky's used to slamming home dunks. They're used to running out in transition. And it's not that Pope didn't do that. They played a modern shoot a lot of threes offense, but it's just they need to have the athletes that look like Kentucky athletes
Yeah.
as opposed to what Ali Khalifa did, which was really good. He was the facilitator for BYU as a big man. He doesn't look the part of what Kentucky was. He's going to Louisville, ironically enough, but I think that Koby Brea is going to lean me in the direction of saying they're going to play the exact same style of offense because that's the type of recruit that Mark Pope would dream over at BYU.
We obviously have nothing specific or official yet from Koby Brea or from Kentucky, but you guys, this just makes sense and all the pieces add up. Now, Kentucky also just got a commitment from Oklahoma State transfer, 6'11 center Brandon Grissom, who has 3 years of eligibility left. This is great. But Leaf, what's kind of weird, odd, I don't know about this, is they've also already got a commitment from Amari Williams, a 6'10 center, and Great Osobor, the Utah State transfer. It kind of felt like me, like that was done and he was going to go there. But now with both Williams and Grissom on the roster, does it make sense for Osobor to land there? We know that now he's starting his visit with Louisville. Could he wind up in the Bluegrass State, but maybe at a different program?
I still think there's a chance Osobor comes back to Utah State because a lot of
Ooh.
that roster is staying together. And maybe that's just like I see a lot of local people on Twitter say like, "Oh, this means Osobor's coming back," and maybe that clouds my decision. But I can see a world in which he says, "Well, you know what? I want to be featured. If you're going to one of these bigger schools, as it stands at Kentucky, he probably would be a featured player. But that's not the way that I envision Kentucky finishing their roster. Like they have pull for a ton of players. So I think Osobor would do very well as constructed at BYU, but I just wonder of how much money he could get elsewhere, because I think there's going to be more players that Kentucky has to pay. And so that's the monetary aspect. And fit-wise, I mean, you just dominated at Utah State. You're the Big West, Mountain West Player of the Year. What are you going to do in the SEC to help your stock? Prove you can compete, or do you want to continue to dominate? And so that's going to be what he has to decide. I hope he plays. Part of me hopes he goes to the SEC so I can see how good he really is as a draft evaluator. But I also like watching him. Like I live in the Mountain Time Zone. The Mountain West was awesome this year. Like I would stay up late here, and it's even later where you are, and even later in the East Coast. And I would stay up and I'd watch him play, and I'd watch Jaden Ledee. And some of the best games I watched in the regular season had him. So I selfishly kind of want to see him stay at Utah State.
It'll be interesting. Lots more to come on that. Kentucky has also garnered commits from Andrew Carr out of Wake Forest, 6'9" guy, Otega Owe, Lamont Butler. We've talked about these guys, but just want to remind us of that. Also, it sounds like Miami transfer Wooga Poplar, not Norchad Omier. We think he's going to St. John's, but Wooga Poplar sounds like is going to visit Lexington, so we'll keep our eyes on that. Speaking of former Kentucky commits, all five of the or five different Calipari previous commitments to Kentucky decommitted, and now they have all found their home. We already knew that Carter Knox, Boogie Fland, and Billy Richmond have all gone with Coach Cal to Arkansas. Jaden Quintains, as we found out, is that going to go to Arizona State. Still shocked by that one, but we just found out earlier this week that Somto Cyril is committing to the Georgia Bulldogs. So there you go, kind of wrapping up that Cal recruiting class from Kentucky. Speaking of Coach Cal, the Wildcats' former coach is making moves for Arkansas. Not just those three freshmen coming with him, but made a huge splash on Tuesday night. We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. How about some national championship odds for next year? Kansas leads the way at plus 1,000, UConn plus 1,100, Duke plus 1,200, Bama and North Carolina tied at plus 1,600. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're going to switch gears from Coach Cal's former school to his new school, Arkansas. But before we get there, literally during the ad break, some news broke, and Leaf Tulane pulled it up, and it's critical right now because it deals with what we just talked about. Utah State, this is from Jeff Goodman on Twitter. Utah State transfer Great Osobor is no longer considering Kentucky, source told Field of 68. The Cats have a front court trio of Amari Williams, Andrew Carr, and Brandon Garrison, as we just talked about. Osobor visits Louisville today, then has visits set with Texas Tech and Washington. So, could, as Leaf said, return to Utah State, but it sounds like right now it's going to be another school. So we'll keep our eyes and ears on that one. Leaf, that's a great catch in real time as we record here on Wednesday, just around the lunch hour. Let's switch to talking about Arkansas. The big news on Tuesday night is that I don't believe it's been confirmed yet, unless I've just missed it on Wednesday morning by either Johnell Davis or Arkansas, but that the FAU transfer, seen as many by the #1 transfer in the entire nation, is going to be a Hog in play for Coach Calipari. Leaf, what do you make of this move?
I mean, I think he's the best transfer in the country. So by my standard, that's got to be a really good get, because there's a lot of talent on this Arkansas team, but it's unproven. It's almost like
Who's the dude? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, is Boogie Fland the guy? Like, that's who I would have assumed would have been the guy had he gone to Kentucky. Now he's at Arkansas, and so he probably is the guy. But a lot of these Kentucky teams that we've aired our grievances about, and why Calipari got fired, was they didn't win because they had a lot of dudes by like McDonald's All-American guys, but they didn't have defined roles. So getting a guy who has led his team to the Final Four, then the next year is the player of the year in his conference, makes me pretty optimistic in the fact that like you can win with the roster as constructed, and there's going to be no like, hey, we didn't have our guys in. If you can get the number one player in the transfer portal, and you have a top 5, probably top 2 recruiting class once all is said and done, and all these transfers or recommitments go through, I have a lot of faith in Arkansas, even though I don't like Calipari as a coach. And I'll be honest, I think he's been overrated for years, and I haven't changed that at all. Before this firing of him heading to Arkansas, that like I've sung that tune for a long time, but I think he's going to be rejuvenated, and motivation matters. Like sometimes your job gets a little too cushy with that lifetime deal in Lexington, and so now he's going to try to prove something. He's got a roster that has a lot of guards. He's got some athletes in the front court, and the best teams Kentucky had largely at the beginning of his tenure at Kentucky were teams that had a really good guard and then just absolutely unbelievable athletes in the front court who were able to clean up mistakes, and they were able to play to their athleticism. And they had one guard who was able to commandeer the ship. And so now they've got Johnell Davis, who's a veteran guard, along with potentially star guards. And I really like Boogie Fland. Like I didn't watch a ton of high school basketball, but he stuck out to me at the McDonald's All-American game. So I'm pretty optimistic when it comes to Arkansas, actually, which is weird because like you would assume losing Musselman, who recruits a bunch of premier talent, would lose you talent, but in fact they have a most talented roster they've had.
And hopefully can come together better than last year's did, which just never was able to come back together. Now, it is important for us to say, I said it already, but let me reiterate again. As of this recording, Davis has not officially committed. Right now, it's still all going off of the report from, again, Jeff Goodman, interestingly enough, from Tuesday night that said that he visited Arkansas the past weekend and is expected to sign with the Razorbacks. All the reporting suggests that Davis would prefer to go to the draft. That's his preference. But Arkansas offered him the bag, and it's hard to turn that down. And this is going to continue to be a thing, which is good for, one of the good sides of NIL is it keeps these guys in school. Now, Leaf, also, Arkansas had already picked up a commitment in the transfer portal from Zvonimir Ivisic, who just played his freshman year at Kentucky, but also on Monday landed Jonas Aidoo, the Tennessee transfer who stays in the SEC. This is a nice little front court. Ivisic showed glimpses in his short time playing this year, especially his first game where he just really kind of burst onto the scene once he was declared eligible. But Aidoo is obviously, you talked about proven guards. He is a proven commodity at the SEC level in the front court. And you add into that all these UK, as you said, recommits over here following Coach Cal, Carter Knox, Boogie Fland, whom you mentioned, and Billy Richmond. In terms of this front court, did they need more? What do you think about it? Does it make sense to you?
I don't think they really need much more at all. I think Jonas Aidoo was the most underrated player in the SEC last year. I thought he should have won the SEC Defensive Player of the Year over his teammate Zakai Ziegler. I think Zvonimir Ivisic is an unbelievable offensive player. He's honestly was abhorrent defensively. Obviously, he can improve and he'll get stronger. So I'm not trying to rip him.
Sure.
But if you have the pair, then you have the strengths of one guy can be really highlighted and without exposing the weaknesses. Like Ivisic, when he'd play at Kentucky, you'd be like, well, they're so bad defensively with him, and they don't have someone who can like clean it up. Like, do we try to go all in on offense, or do we try to go a little bit better on defense? And they battled that all year. So I think they could even play together because Ivisic is that good of a shooter.
Ooh.
I'm not saying that's what I expect, but I think they have the versatility. And so if you have the versatility to play together, or more likely, and what I expect to play separately, I don't think they need more horses in the front court. Maybe some guys who can play small ball, or maybe you go with some 3s and 4s, but their front 5 spots really locked up. And I think Aidoo, like I said, I think Aidoo is an unbelievable player. And for your Tar Heels, I thought he should have been the primary target in the portal.
Yeah, on that side of it, I was disappointed, was looking forward to that. Carolina is getting a visit from Cliff Amore starting tomorrow, the Rutgers transfer, who's just coming out of Tuscaloosa. So going to be interesting to see. But yes, I agree with you. I think Aidoo would have been a great fit at Chapel Hill, and I think is a great get for Coach Cal. And here's something that this always says to me. With these like intra-conference transfers, Coach Cal has seen this dude play for years now. right? He knows what he is, he knows his strengths and knows his weaknesses and wanted him. And so, I feel like I've seen a lot of Tennessee fans saying like, "Oh, Aidoo is soft, he folds." And I hear that and I get it. But John Calipari has seen all that and yet really, really wanted Jonas Aidoo there in Fayetteville. So that's going to be interesting to keep our eyes on and see what happens, how this Arkansas roster all comes together. As you said, an accumulation of a lot of great talent. How will Coach Cal utilize it? How will he get all the pieces to work together? We'll wait and see on that. But a big, big get, assuming we do hear official word about Johnell Davis. Speaking of Mr. Davis, one of his FAU teammates announced his transfer plan recently, and it's another front court that I'm really curious to see how the pieces all fit together. We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Monopoly Go. All right, hang on. Game off. Timeout. We got to pause here and talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying. Isaac, come on, man. Flag on the play. You've already been talking about this. But there's just so much good stuff in this game that we got to get to. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you actually work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. And there's a bunch of them to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, or cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and even hilarious emojis with which you can taunt your friends when you smash their buildings. Take that, Leaf Tulane. Here's a funny emoji, right? Love it. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of these include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Leaf Tulane, we just talked about a front court that has landed two big guys, and your thought was, maybe sometimes Ivisic and Aidoo could play together at Arkansas. Maybe not all the time, but in certain lineups. The question for new Michigan coach, Dusty May, who already had a commitment from Yale's Danny Wolf, just landed a commitment from one of his former players at FAU, Vlad Goldin, who now follows him from Boca Raton up to Ann Arbor. What a difference those two settings are, by the way. That's kind of hilarious to think about. Leaf, in the same vein we just talked about with Arkansas's front court, is there a world in which you could see Vlad Goldin and Danny Wolf, who are two very different style bigs, playing together at the same time on the floor?
I don't think so in that case. I think even though their styles are a little different, like Golden's a true rim running, catch the ball on a pick and roll or a lob, or if he gets a switch on the screen, he's going to bury a smaller guy. And Wolf's a little more skill oriented, can space a little bit, put the ball on the floor. I don't think there's enough athleticism between the two defensively, and especially in the Big Ten, which often has a lot of big guys. But I think teams are starting to zag when everyone's been zigging, or vice versa, in the sense that, okay, Purdue's played two bigs. We've had to match their clientele a lot of times over the years, starting with Hammonds and Haas, and then Haas and Swan again, and Harms, and then obviously Williams and Edey, and you can keep going on if you've watched basketball in the Big Ten for a while. But teams are starting to play quicker bigs. I mean, you saw Coleman Hawkins lead Illinois to the Elite Eight with he and Terrence Shannon. He was a thin big, so I think you only play one big, and it's not like Michigan's lacking for talent at the wing spot either, and that's part of the factor is, like, if they didn't have enough talent, maybe you do go big boy and play two bigs on the basketball court at once. But I think they have enough athletic wings in order to play a style that's more modern, and I think it's gonna be Golden as the starter, Wolf as the backup.
Okay, that was my very next question. Why would you go in that order? Because that's what I would do as well. For me, I think it's because of the talent. Like you think about Sam Walters and what he brings over from Alabama. There's the size at 6'10". There's the shooting that he brings. Why would you go Golden over Wolf?
I think he's a more physical presence. I think he'll rebound better in the Big Ten. I think he causes more issues defensively with his skill set as someone who rim runs and dominates near the glass, is a really good finisher. I mean, his main issue over the last years was foul trouble. Like, it wasn't an effectiveness thing, even as he was a raw player and he's become more refined. you mentioned a really good point, and that's what I was trying to allude to, is like you have athletic wings or people that can complement. Like Namari Burnett came back,
That's
and
right.
he's more of the athletic mold, but Sam Walters is a knockdown shooter. So would I rather have Walters next to Goldin or Wolf next to Goldin? Wolf can step out and play on the perimeter, but he's a 5, and Walters is not a great athlete, but he's a solid one who's got height, and so you can not sacrifice height or positional size by having him play at the 4, and then you also have the complementary skill sets, and he'll get great shots due to Goldin's gravity. And I just don't think Wolf has that same gravity that Goldin does.
I agree with you there. Yes, as Leaf said, another part of the news we got on Tuesday is that Namari Burnett is returning to Michigan. This is great news for Coach May, who, they've gotten other guys in too. Roddy Gale, I like him coming in from Ohio State. Trey Donaldson coming from Auburn. A couple guys there. Reuben Jones, who I'm really curious to see how he translates from North Texas this year. So lots to keep an eye on at Michigan. So, folks, want to remind you, the transfer portal does close tonight at midnight. More names hopping in even in real time. We're just going to probably see this going on and on through the day. And so keep your eye on it, and we'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. The latest, Trayvon Brazile from Arkansas is in the transfer portal. So we'll see what happens there. Unfortunately, just as Leaf had said to me previously today, just kind of a shell of himself at this point. Would love to see Brazile get back to playing better. We'll be back with you tomorrow. If you're not already subscribed to the show on audio and video, would encourage you to do that. It's so easy, and then you can always keep tabs on things. If you're not part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community, the link's in the show notes. It's free and easy to join. We'd love to have you there to talk about all of this in Discord as well. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats, a whole host of Wildcats we've been talking about today. And until tomorrow, peace.